Coming in at number 10 is Calendar Man. Julian Gregory Day, whose name is a pun on the Julian and Gregorian calendars, has an obsession with dates, committing crimes that always have a relationship to the date that they are committed on, usually covering the major holidays. Like most of the messed up members of the Batman's rogue gallery, Calendar Man had a rough childhood. His parents neglected him, which almost resulted in his death from days of exposure, which in turn resulted in his complete psychotic break, an obsession with days and holidays. First appearing in Detective Comics number 259 in September of 1958, Calendar Man was a bit sillier, using different costumes to commit crimes based on the days of the calendar, like dressing up as an Indian magician representing the monsoon season. But after the Crisis on Infinite Earths, Calendar Man was barely used and instead got a great revamp by writer Jeff Loeb, Batman The Long Halloween. In this new version, Calendar Man was institutionalized in Arkham Asylum and was deemed as an insane, ruthless criminal with abbreviations of the months tattooed around his head in a circle with no silly costumes or ridiculous crimes. Number 9. Flamingo. Eduardo Flamingo, known as Flamingo, is a world-famous serial taker of lives and assassin. He is well known for a specific thing he does which inspired his sometimes name of the Eater of Faces, which explains itself, I'd say. Eduardo was actually a morally strong advocate and fighter against organized crime, but it changed when he was captured and underwent forced brain surgery that altered his personality, making him dangerously psychotic. Now, the incredibly colorful Flamingo is an enforcer and assassin, rocking a very unique look and somehow totally making a pink motorcycle not look silly. He has a dark, unfeeling personality and is an expert marksman, which makes up for his lack of powers and makes him a pretty dangerous threat for Batman. He has even temporarily paralyzed Damian Wayne, so think twice before you judge. He'll chew your face off, man. Batman's obscure villains usually happen to be a bit more serious and psychotic, but a lot of obscure villains can be completely ridiculous and silly, which makes me wonder, what are some of the silliest and wackiest, commonly unknown villains that you guys love? Let me know in the comments and I'll get on with this video. Number 8. Humpty Dumpty. With his house being demolished, his dog being run over, and his parents being crushed by a Christmas tree on Christmas, things weren't too great for Humphrey Dumpler. He was mistreated by his grandmother, who he was forced to live with, and because of his appearance and mental capacity, he was bullied. Of all things, the last straw for Humphrey was missing a subway train. Humphrey was obsessed with fixing things, and since the missing of the train, he started going out late at night to disassemble and reassemble mechanical devices which had upset him in some way. But since he wasn't very intelligent and all the info he got was from books, the things he fixed actually caused a lot of accidents. The first was the same train he missed, which then crashed. Now going by Humpty Dumpty, he was tracked down by Batgirl, who dislocated her shoulder, saving him. Humpty Dumpty fixed her shoulder, but then also revealed that he had evolved from disassembling devices to disassembling and reassembling people. Namely his grandmother, who he believed had to have been broken and in need of repair. So he took her apart, then attempted to sew her back together again with bootlaces. Wow, that got really dark, like really quick. Kind of uncomfy. Number 7. Joker's daughter. Honestly, did not even know this character existed, which just shows how much I don't know about Batman's villains. Duella Dent is all over the place. Psychologically, I mean. She started as the villain who refers to herself as Joker's daughter, even though she is absolutely not his daughter. As you can tell, she has an unhealthy obsession with the clown, which has been a thing since she debuted in Batman Family number 6 in 1976. She has also claimed to be the daughter of Catwoman, Scarecrow, Riddler, and Penguin. She deduced Robin's identity, and he in turn revealed that she was Duella Dent, and that it was believed that she was actually Two-Face's daughter, which also isn't true, as she is actually from Earth 3 and her father was Jokester, with her mother being Evelyn Dent, Earth 3's Three-Face. Despite not being Joker's child, Duella proves herself worthy of the title. She uses equipment that is very similar to the Joker's usual flair, and more recently she has been rewritten as almost completely bonkers, which is especially evident after the Clown Prince's seeming demise. Also, before 2011, she was on the Teen Titans as Harlequin for a while. Number 6. Cornelius Stirk. Cornelius Stirk is one of those villains that you don't hear much about, but is one of the more gruesome and terrifying members of Batman's rogue gallery. Stirk suffers from delusions which make him believe that he requires the nutrients of a human heart in order to stay alive, and not just any heart. Specifically, Cornelius believes believes that the heart is the most nutritious when it is full of norepinephrine, a natural hormone that secretes when a person is terrified, as well as adrenaline. So he uses his unexplained psionic ability to mentally make people perceive him as someone else, which, other than allowing him to break out of Arkham Asylum, also allowed him to get close to his victims and then completely terrify them in the most insane ways before he quickly ends them and partakes in a nice old hearty meal, literally. I think the interesting thing about Stirk is that he is actually really effective at what he does, being able to evade Batman and even render him unconscious on one occasion. Number 5. Maxi Zeus. I had a really cool history professor in high school who specifically taught classics, which is Greek and Roman history. Super cool guy, but I'm just imagining him becoming a Gotham crime lord. He was an awesome person, so I just can't see it, but luckily in DC Comics we have Maxi Zeus, a former history teacher. Following the loss of his wife, Maxi Zeus started to suffer from delusions that he was the actual human reincarnation of the god Zeus. Using his genius-level intellect, he became a Gotham City crime lord, establishing himself and his group of followers. Cultists. Mobsters. I don't really know. He had a short-lived battle against Batman, and he has been pretty much locked up at Arkham ever since, occasionally breaking out. Most recently though, his randomly super strong and ripped body was used to revive Deacon Blackfire, but this didn't last very long, so it doesn't really matter. Number 4. Colonel Sulphur. This Denny O'Neil created villain from the 70s is an espionage expert with a weaponized artificial hand, a tool he has used to commit very espionage type crimes. He's very Bond villainy if we're being honest. Colonel Sulphur has a strange sunlight fixation though, meaning he only allows himself to act on his violent urges in the quote morning's earliest minutes, which is one hell of a specific yet very obscure time frame for criminal activity. He did actually prove to be a bit more of a threat when he joined the Army of Crime. When the Army of Crime's activities were challenged by Batman and Superman, Sulphur used an alien weapon to trap Superman and Batman in a timeless dimension. Sulphur then used stolen weapons to take over Gotham City, but as you may suspect, he was soon stopped by Batman and Superman, who had escaped from the timeless dimension. These things happen. Sorry, dude. Number 3. Lord Deathman. The Japanese crime boss known as Lord Deathman has battled Batman both in American comics and in Japanese manga, using his powers to seemingly overcome death itself, able to rise from the grave no matter what his injury is. In his first appearance in Batman number 180 in May 1966, he passed away 3 times using a yogi technique to appear dead before the final conflict, which saw him get struck by lightning and actually pass away. But since then, he has actually gained the real power to come back from the dead, but at the cost of having a bare bones skull for a head. His regenerative abilities are so powerful that his blood is used to create the infamous Lazarus pits that Ra's al Ghul uses to stay young and immortal. One of the first ways Batman defeated Lord Death with his new powers is honestly a little out of character for the Crusader. He threw Lord Deathman off a building into the path of an armored car, which took the criminal down just long enough for Catwoman to lock him in a safe, and then he was shot into space. And he still came back. Number 2, the Condiment King. I think at this point, Condiment King is a little more well known, just because of how ridiculous he is. He first appeared in the DC animated universe as Buddy Standler, who was a comedian manipulated by the Joker into being a Batman villain. He became an even bigger joke of a character when he was introduced to the DC Comics as Mitchell Mayo. No, I am not joking, yes, that is his actual name. No one really takes Condiment King that seriously, and I can understand why, although it should be noted that he can totally stain your clothes, and if you're allergic to any of the condiments he fires out of his ketchup, barbecue sauce, and mustard guns, then he can be quite dangerous. What I'm most curious of is the quality of his short-lived restaurant when he temporarily went legit. Can you imagine if he couldn't even get food right? That would just suck. Number 1, Johnny Karaoke. I actually couldn't find a page for Johnny Karaoke on the DC Wiki, so that should tell you just how obscure this guy actually is. Johnny Karaoke is a Yakuza loan shark who has the odd knack of singing into his microphone as he is committing his crimes. A microphone whose stand doubles as a sword that he will pull out on you when you let your guard down from laughing at him. On top of his odd singing career, Johnny leads a little gang known as the Geisha Girls. That's spelled Grrrls, like girls. very, very fear-inspiring. Maybe not the most intimidating of Batman's villains, not at all really, but this villain is honestly just too interesting to stay buried for too long. I'm personally advocating for the big screen debut of Johnny Karaoke, and it better be comic book accurate.
Number 10, Sportsmaster. Starting off with a pretty vanilla villain, Lawrence Crusher Croc was a very competitive sportsman who excelled at many sports, but he never played fair. Doing anything possible to win, he was eventually banned from playing any sport at a professional level, which for some reason led him to a life of crime. I don't know why. After a run-in with the Green Lantern, he supposedly dies, but it's revealed that he actually just faked his death, and that's when he became the Sportsmaster. After little success as a solo villain, Croc decided to join the Injustice Society, but after a series of crimes, he ends up in jail for a while. After serving his time, he teamed up with the Huntress and actually ended up marrying her, has a daughter, and then the three of them committed crimes together as one big happy crime family. Croc does eventually lose his life at the hands of the Human Flame following the events of Final Crisis though. With basically no superpowers other than being pretty good at sports, it's no wonder this villain has been forgotten in time. Check him out in his first appearance, All-American Comics number 85. Number 9, The Eraser. Probably the villain with the most interesting attire on this list today, Leonard Fiasco actually went to high school alongside Bruce Wayne. Due to his low grades, he actually ended up dropping out of school and turned to a life of crime as the villain Eraser. He apparently chose that name as a reminder of his constant failures during his school life, and also because he wanted to provide a special service to the criminals of Gotham City. Donning an eraser helmet that looks exactly like the top of a pencil, and alongside his signature yellow suit, he has been seen throughout the years erasing every trace of evidence left at any crime scene, making it impossible for the police to find any clues, and he does such a good job of it that he manages to stump Batman and Robin from time to time. He is eventually caught by the dynamic duo though after they infiltrate his hideout, and not much has been seen of him since. If you're interested in his story, check him out in his first appearance in 1966, Batman number 188. Number 8, Condiment King. Now with a name like Mitchell Mayo, it makes sense that this villain's name would be the Condiment King. Once an inmate of Arkham Asylum, Mayo somehow managed to break out but was immediately subdued by Batman and Catwoman. His dream was to one day open a restaurant on Coney Island, and he actually does achieve that, stating he's turned legit and wants nothing more than to leave his life of crime behind. However, he does later don his suit once more and does his best to wreak havoc against Batman and Nightwing. Possessing no powers whatsoever, Mayo relies heavily on his gadgets, the most prominent being his condiment guns. These guns shoot a variety of sauces including ketchup, barbecue sauce, mustard, and more. However, it's kinda useless because it doesn't shoot anything at a high enough pressure to be lethal. The best it can do is create a nasty stain and just ruin your day. Check out this villain for yourself in his first appearance in Birds of Prey Volume 1 number 37, or in his New 52 reintroduction in 2016's Batman Volume 3 number 9. Number 7, we have Johnny Karaoke. The crooning Yakuza loan shark is the next on our list today. Definitely not the most fearsome of Batman foes, however, this villain is way too interesting to stay buried for too long. After all, you've got to respect any American fearsome enough to rise through the ranks of the Yakuza. Although he seems like a very happy-go-lucky kind of guy, this is all an act because once you let your guard down around him, he'll whip out his cane that doubles as a microphone and a sword and do whatever he feels is necessary to protect himself and his geisha girls. Though he hasn't really made any appearances outside of his first appearance in 2007's Batman number 660, the character Jonathan John Charisma Brown from Batman Arkham Knight is heavily influenced by him and likely an homage to the smooth-talking Elvis impersonator. Like many lesser-known Batman villains, Johnny does not possess any powers other than the ability to sing pretty well, but his connection to the Yakuza combined with his own skills makes him a fairly dangerous foe. Number 6, Flamingo. Edward Flamingo, known professionally as the Assassin Flamingo, is truly ruthless, and I'm genuinely surprised he hasn't appeared in the media more. As an emotionless, unfeeling killer with the odd tendency to eat his victims' faces after he's killed them, Flamingo has proven to be a formidable foe as he is able to temporarily paralyze Damian Wayne, and would have killed him if it lasted longer, showing that he has no problem killing anyone whatsoever. He even nearly killed the Red Hood and would have gotten away with it if it weren't for the intervention of Dick Grayson, who had recently taken up the mantle of Batman after Bruce Wayne's death. As a master assassin, Flamingo has the know-how to use pretty much every firearm imaginable, and thanks to his iconic pink motorcycle, he is rarely caught. Described as an evil Zorro by his creator Grant Morrison, why not check him out for yourself in 2007's Batman number 666. Number 5, Maxi Zeus. Chronologically the fourth Batman villain to be committed to Arkham Asylum behind the Joker, Two-Face, and Rupert Thorne, Maximilian started out with pretty humble beginnings as a Greek history teacher. After his wife dies from unrevealed circumstances, Zeus loses his sanity and becomes a crime lord, using his intelligence and resources to rise to power in Gotham's underworld. Upon his very first murder though, he is thwarted by Batman and committed to Arkham Asylum, where he escaped from many times. one of which Batman actually let slide, as it was so he could go wish his daughter happy birthday. With each escape leading him to lose more and more of his sanity, Zeus eventually gets to a point where he joins forces with the children of Ares, Deimos, Phobos, and Eris, to help merge Gotham City with Ares' throne capital, the Areopagus. Maxie is actually killed as a result of this whole plot, and his sacrifice is what brings the return of Ares, who is thankfully stopped by Wonder Woman. Funnily enough, it's actually revealed about a year later that Maxie is alive and well and running an illegal casino that eventually gets shut down thanks to a tip from the boy Wonder, and Maxie is sent back to jail without any struggle. You've probably guessed it, but this guy doesn't have any powers either. Basically, his knowledge as a history teacher and his ability to lead got him as far as possible, which is pretty impressive if you ask me. Check him out in his first appearance in 1979's Detective Comics number 483. Number 4. Dollhouse. As the daughter of Barton Mathis, known best as the Doll Maker, Matilda Mathis commits crimes and operates under the name Dollhouse. From a young age, she was taught how to hunt and slaughter people and usually wore a doll face that was grafted over her own when committing these crimes. Forced to go into hiding after her father's business starts to go wrong after he kidnaps Batman, she is the only one of his children to actually end up resurfacing and to carry on the family business later on. Dollhouse picks up right where her father left off, taking Gotham's more misfortunate citizens and making money off of their organs through the black market. Like Dollmaker, Matilda turns the bodies into dolls, of which she actually keeps more than a few for her own dollhouse. Making her first appearance in 2011's Detective Comics Volume 2, Number 2, check out her twisted upbringing for yourself and let me know in the comments below what you think. Number 3. The Ventriloquist. Since his debut in Detective Comics number 583, 3 versions of the Ventriloquist have perplexed audiences. These versions being Arnold Wesker, Peyton Riley, and New 52's Shauna Belzer, but let's focus on Wesker as he is the best known of the 3. Because of his multiple personality disorder, Wesker uses a ventriloquist dummy to commit mob-related crimes. This doll, famously named Scarface for his Al Capone-like appearance, controls Wesker and the crime business they run. If Scarface isn't present, then Wesker projects an identity onto another inanimate object, usually sock puppets or anything else that he can use as a puppet. First appearing in 1988's Detective Comics number 583, we've seen Wesker as a member of the Secret Society of Supervillains, the Black Lantern Corps, and even the Justice League of Arkham, with all the stories and battles leading up to his tragic death in 2006's Detective Comics number 818. A year after surviving Luthor's attempt to recreate the multiverse, we see the Great White Shark burst into Wesker's apartment and kill him with a single shot to the head. Man, it's such a sad way to go for such a good villain. Number 2. Professor Pig. Laszlo Valentine, aka Professor Pig, and that's P-Y-G not P-I-G, was a former agent of Spiral driven mad by his own mind-eroding drugs, and he was an enemy of Dick Grayson and Damian Wayne during their time as Batman and Robin. Characterized as a schizophrenic, Pig's mental illness explains many of his habits, one of the most prominent being his desire to make everything perfect. Now, how does he go about accomplishing this task? Well, by unleashing Dollatrons and mind-altering substances onto Gotham City. The Dollatrons are at the center of Professor Pig's story depravity, being brainwashed people who followed his every command as though they were robots. And though they act as his loyal minions, the Dollatrons are actually very much expendable and have been replaced many, many times. Despite his mental illness, Valentine is still a formidable foe with a mastery of basic hand-to-hand combat and a high-level proficiency with a knife, since they were once an incredible surgeon able to perform complicated surgeries, once actually switching a hand with a foot. Making their first appearance alongside Flamingo in 2007's Batman number 666, check out their origin story for yourself or read their New 52 introduction in Batman Volume 2 number 1. And finally, number 1, the Phantasm. Created for the DC animated movie Batman Mask of the Phantasm, Andrea Beaumont treads that line between good and evil as the vigilante, the Phantasm. Her and Bruce were university sweethearts and actually had plans to get married one day. However, her father was a rich businessman who got involved with the wrong kind of people and ended up having to go into hiding, and eventually all that got him killed. This drove Andrea to take revenge on all those who were a member of the criminal gang who killed her father, especially Jack Napier, who ended up becoming the Clown Prince of Crime. To take her revenge on Chucky Soul, Buzz Bronski, and Sal Valestra, she dons the mantle of the Phantasm, a figure that kind of resembles the Grim Reaper, complete with a scythe that she wears over her right hand. Using her father's money to hone her skills, she returns to Gotham years later to complete her goal of killing all the mob bosses. However, she does not get the chance to kill the Joker as Batman ends up intervening. Years later, she does kind of redeem herself by not killing Terry McGinnis' parents after being hired to, but after causing so much bloodshed, I really think she's more on the evil side of things. If you want to see her story for yourself, check out Batman Mask of the Phantasm and let me know what you think. Number 10, Mr. Bloom. The concept of darkness is one that is intrinsically tied to Batman. I mean, everyone should come to expect it from a character referred to as the Dark Knight. So it only makes sense to put the character up against the opposite of darkness, light, and that is where Mr. Bloom comes to play. His past, as well as his motives, remain a mystery to this day, but in no way does that mean he didn't leave a huge impact on Gotham City. With the ability to bestow powers onto any other human being at the cost of shortening that individual's life, Mr. Bloom provided these quote-unquote seeds to a select few, and crime blossomed and grew like a weed from the lowest reaches of Gotham City. Not only could he bestow powers onto others through his seeds though, he also had some powers of his own, including mechakinesis, pyrokinesis, cryokinesis, science alteration, and of course, superhuman strength and agility. Check him out for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 2015's Batman Volume 2, all the way until his death in 2016's Batman Volume 2, number 50. Number 9. Black Spider. When Eric Needham was a young lad, he unfortunately became addicted to drugs and turned to a life of crime in order to fuel that addiction. He raided and robbed his father's liquor store and actually killed his old man in the process, which landed him in jail, where he kicked that nasty drug habit and took up a life of fighting the war on drugs. Donning a costume, he became a self-styled vigilante and began killing those suspected of dealing any sort of drugs. Now in his mind, Batman and him had a common enemy and they should have been allies, but the Dark Knight thought differently due to Needham's tendency to, kill. Batman interfered with his plans many times, and that led to Needham turning to a life of crime instead, teaming up with some of the other villains in order to get revenge on Batman. During his crusade, Needham's wife and son were killed by a drug lord who had discovered the Black Spider's identity, and in a rage, the Spider prepared for one final assault. After being shot multiple times, Needham invaded the drug lord's headquarters and detonated explosives strapped to his back, killing the drug dealers in the process. Give his story a read for yourself, starting with 1976's Detective Comics number 463. Number 8. The Black and White Bandit. Once a successful artist, Roscoe Chiara was commissioned to paint a portrait of Windsor Munzel, the head of a chemical corporation. His company had created some new pigments specifically for painting, however, Chiara did not know that the paints were untested, and began to have these serious headaches. On the final end of painting, Chiara fell asleep and awoke to a colorless sunrise, because he had gone completely colorblind as a result of the pigments. To get his revenge, he became the Black and White Bandit and began a campaign against Munzel, stealing various pieces of art from his collection and his museum. He doesn't have any powers per se, but he is a master of disguise, as he has been seen as a blind man and a nun, and he is also a getaway master thanks to his zebra. It didn't take long for Batman to catch wind of what was going on, and after 2 encounters, he defeated the Black and White Bandit with only a false advertisement and just a punch to the nose. He hasn't really been seen since, but it's presumed that he is reformed or he's either still in jail. We're not 100% sure. Check him out in 2001's Batman Gotham Knights, number 12. Number 7. Amygdala. Prone to fits of homicidal rage, Aaron Helsinger was put in the care of Arkham Asylum and had his amygdala cluster removed, in hopes of curing his psychotic episodes. It actually ended up doing the exact opposite though, and Aaron became even more angry than before. During his time at Arkham, Aaron became a pawn of Jeremiah Arkham and was used to attack Batman many times to try and break his spirits, but it's Batman, so that didn't really happen. A short time later, Bane orchestrated a massive breakout at Arkham Asylum, and all of the patients, including Amygdala, were freed, and he teamed up with the Ventriloquist to wreak some havoc on Gotham City. It didn't take long for Batman to take down Amygdala and arrest him, sending him to Blackgate Penitentiary, where he became the star member of the prison softball team. He was eventually released and actually lived in the same apartment building as Dick Grayson for a while, all until Blockbuster blew up the entire apartment complex. Check out Amygdala for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1992's Batman Shadow of the Bat, number 3. Number 6. Merrymaker. Dr. Byron Meredith was a crazed doctor that worked at Arkham Asylum who used pretty interesting methods to treat and rehabilitate his patients, his favorite being torture. Byron was one of the few doctors who could actually tolerate the Joker, and he ended up becoming obsessed with him and just studied him endlessly until he was fired and went into a solo practice. Eventually creating the costume for the Merrymaker, Meredith created that role so that he could lead his 4 new Joker-obsessed patients into a life of crime. Meredith's plan was to create this uncanny society so that the 4 would do his bidding. While the Joker-themed criminals attacked civilians, Meredith would sneak into a nearby building where one of his enemies, either his ex-wife, her lawyer, etc. would be, and this way he could easily perform a kill, while the members of the League of Smiles would attract Batman and the GCPD's attention. Check the Merrymaker and the League of Smiles out for yourself in 2013's Detective Comics Volume 2, number 16. Number 5. Zombie. Best known as an associate of Bane, Zombie was actually a pretty big reason behind Bane being able to become one of Gotham's best known criminals. He was once an assistant at the medical medical facility that gave Bane his abilities, and he then aided Bane in escaping prison, and was the one who found a way for Bane to get his daily dose of venom. Shortly after Bird's encounter with Batman, Bane defeated the Dark Knight and his rise to power started. Bird, Trog, and Zombie started a rampage over the city to eliminate competition and recruit more members to Bane's crime empire, as they were commanded by their boss, of course. Bird, Trog, and Zombie were sent by Bane to verify the supposed threat of a new Batman, and the three of them were brutally defeated by the new Dark Knight. They were arrested and locked away by the police, and each of them were interrogated about Bane's activities, but none of them revealed anything because they are good henchmen. They did eventually break out of prison, but it didn't take too long for them to end up back there. Check out Zombie in his first appearance in 1993's Batman Vengeance of Bane, number 1. Number 4, Mr. Camera. Called Mr. Camera for obvious reasons, because of the camera lens helmet he used to wear on his crimes, and also because he employed all sorts of photographic devices on his criminal raids. Used to record his crimes, and on one very special day, he actually managed to get some footage of Batman and Robin in their secret identities. Although he was captured that same day because, Batman and Robin really didn't want that information to get out, he did manage to hide the tape, hoping to use it eventually against the dynamic duo. Not too long after, Batman and Robin found the tape and discovered that the footage was actually too obscure to even see anything, which meant that their secret had never actually been exposed and that they had nothing to worry about at all. This particular version of Mr. Camera was unfortunately erased from the DC Comics history after Crisis on Infinite Earths, but there have been some one-off appearances in recent years of this character. Check him out for yourselves, starting with 1954's Batman number 81. Number 3, Lockup. Lyle Bolton, aka Lockup, is another non-powered villain who specialized in incarceration, high-tech security weapons, and escapology. He was first seen capturing the criminals Charaxus and Maxwell Veazey, but decided that these minor villains were too easy for him, and went for the big guns in the form of Two-Face, who he successfully captured and took back to his private prison. He is eventually stopped by the police while targeting a criminal turned state evidence, and is revealed to be Lyle Bolton, who was previously discharged from the police academy for being too gung-ho and dismissed from several security jobs. Later during the events of No Man's Land, having taken control of Blackgate Prison in the aftermath of the Cataclysm. He had enlisted the KG Beast and the Trigger Twins to act as the wardens for his prison and ruled with an iron fist, but Batman tolerated his presence because he required Lockup to keep captured criminals in check to prevent Gotham from being overrun with them. Lockup was kept under strict orders to treat the prisoners well, and then towards the end of the event, Batman enlisted Nightwing's help to overthrow Lockup so Blackgate could be used by the lawful authorities once again. Check him out in his first appearance in 1996's Robin Volume 2, number 24. Number 2, Johnny Stitches. A Gotham City underboss for the Intergang, Johnny Donetto worked for Tobias Wales until he was caught stealing from him and was subjected to some pretty serious torture and mutilation, and just straight up thrown out of a window to die in an alley. Thankfully, he was found by Bruno Mannheim, who thought that Johnny had some potential, and he had Desaad fix him and stitch him up as best he could. Now operating under the name Johnny Stitches, he worked aggressively to remove the remaining large criminals in Gotham after the deportations of all supervillains from Earth. With his newfound power over people, Stitches used the Iceberg Lounge as a meeting place for Intergang and would eventually cause Penguin some pretty big trouble with the various vigilantes of the city. After Batman's sudden disappearance, Stitches organized a wager in Intergang's HQ, but they were interrupted by Vigilante, who broke into the place and challenged Stitches with the intention of killing him. Arming himself with a knife, Stitches was about to start his attack, but Vigilante was suddenly attacked by an invisible person that pushed him out of the building. Check him out in 2008's Gotham Underground, number 3. Number 1, Film Freak II. Known only as Edison, this man is the second Film Freak, a disturbed cinephile who had a strange obsession with Catwoman, and ran a late-night WUAB TV Studios operated show displaying amateur film clips made by his underlings. After obtaining footage from one of his henchmen showing Selina Kyle and Holly both wearing their Catwoman suits, he poisoned his goons, citing Alfred Hitchcock's Suspicion, in order to not let him divulge the information. He later deduced the real Catwoman, Selina, was hiding in Gotham City under the pseudonym of Irina Dubrovna, the main character of Val Lewton's 1942 film Cat People. He, along with Angleman, broke into Selina's apartment and threatened her infant daughter Helena. Eventually, due to Film Freak's obsession with shots and filming, she was able to incapacitate both of them, thankfully. She also asked her friend Zatanna to wipe her identity from their minds, similar to what she had done earlier with Dr. Light, and made them confess to their crimes to the authorities. Fast forward a bit, and in his final act of villainy, we see him manage to get his hands on an atom bomb, paying homage to Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, and while citing Network, announced on live TV that all Gothamites would have had their lives saved if they were able to solve a film-themed riddle. However, after shooting a movie critic that he employed to deliver the uranium for the bomb, Film Freak was finally defeated by Catwoman, who also managed to defuse the bomb.
Starting us off in at number 10, Bootface. Okay, this guy's origin is the reason I wanted to talk about him. Bootface's origin was getting kicked in the face by Batman. That's it. I'm not even kidding. Bootface was a thug working for Terminus. He got his name because of the boot print embedded in his face, which, like I said, is from Batman. Bootface first appeared in Batman and Robin Volume 2 number 10 from 2012, and honestly, it's one of the most interesting origins I've seen. And I mean this completely seriously. Everyone else has like relatives die or was living in poverty. This dude just got kicked in the face and got so mad that he became a supervillain. Like, even if he wasn't really a good person beforehand, I mean, like, he was a thug and basically still is, but this time he has a ridiculous name. And a man who is fueled by pure rage because he was permanently scarred by his attacker that ends up being a superhero, yeah, that's good enough for me. Plus, I hadn't heard of this guy, so maybe you didn't either. And at 9, Professor Pig. Professor Pig originally debuted in the alternate reality story of Batman number 666, which I love. However, was introduced as a recurring character in 2009 in Batman and Robin number 1. In Batman Reborn, Laszlo Valentine was an extreme circus mob boss until something turned him into Professor Pig, leading him to begin funding his scientific experiments by selling, illicit substances to the criminal underworld. All in all, he's an extremely disturbing villain and makes me think about why people aren't afraid of pigs as they are afraid of clowns. Because if you ask me, this guy is freaking horrifying. Professor Pig, if you couldn't tell, actually ends up wearing a pig mask along with a butcher's apron and what at times appears to be some form of hastily thrown together surgical outfit. This is just freaking weird, and he ends up brainwashing and controlling various people, and he ends up calling them Dollatrons. Straight up, I don't know what else to do with him other than just run away, so I'm going to move on now. Although next time I have a pet pig in Minecraft, I know what I'm naming him. And at 8, Joker's daughter. Unfortunately, it's not Joker's biological daughter. That would be a very interesting story. But this is just a girl who finds Joker's face, stitches it onto hers, and then goes berserk. So honestly, it could very well be his biological spawn. The only person that I think could commit such an atrocious act like this is the Joker, so who knows. While maybe not being as prolific and accomplished as the Joker, Joker's daughter is definitely insane enough to make this list, even if I'm pretty sure many people know about her. But hey, even if one person didn't and they watched this video, then boom, it's enough for me and it counts. But not to mention the fact that she also went by Catgirl, Scarecrow, Riddler's daughter, Penguin's daughter, Card Queen, and Harley Quinn. Each incarnation also calling herself the respected super person's daughter, which I have to say is going to make the family reunion very awkward. But in actuality, she ended up being Duella Dent, Two-Face's daughter. Apparently, which seems like BS, but we all love a girl with a little flair, you know? And at 7, Birthday Boy. Ray Salinger was a serial killer who operated in Gotham. Under the alias Birthday Boy, he was actually the first costume criminal encountered by Batman during his crime-fighting career. Introduced in Batman Earth 1 Volume 1 in 2012, Birthday Boy is fascinated by young girls resembling his first kill, a 15-year-old named Amanda Grant. When in his killer mode, he wears a burlap sack with holes cut out for his eyes and a birthday party hat, usually in a room decorated like a young girl's room at a birthday party. Great. As a calling card, he left birthday candles where he stole away his victim and told his victims to make a wish to a cake decorated with the words "Happy Birthday, Amanda," which is only creepier since we have our own Amanda here, and I feel like this guy is a representation of all her DMs. I think the sickest part of this character though was that when Batman first started, Birthday Boy had been hired by Mayor Oswald Cobblepot to eliminate his various enemies, and in return, he was given girls from the street or enemies of the Penguin as a reward. God. This is something that you'd see on like Criminal Minds. And at 6, the King of Cats. First introduced in, I don't think this was ironically, Batman number 69, nice, from 1952, Carl Kyle is the brother of Selina Kyle, who was inspired by his sister's infamy to become a costume criminal. His cat-like garb and his crimes revolved around the theme of cats, and he resembles a male version of Catwoman. In March of 1952, Gotham City was struck by a series of feline-related crimes, perpetrated not by the now reformed Selina Kyle, but by a costume criminal known as the King of Cats. Carl sends flowers to Selina, causing Batman to investigate her involvement, like the jealous boyfriend he is. He soon becomes convinced that she is innocent, but asks that her, the expert on feline-themed crimes, didn't know that was a thing, to aid him and Robin in arresting the King of Cats. Selina, however, refuses because it's her brother, but she doesn't tell Batman that. He gets captured easily by Batman and has his handed to him multiple times. I guess you're a punching bag when you're not a female that Batman wants to sleep with. Sorry, Carl. Halfway through in at number 5, Mirror Man. Lloyd Ventress is a criminal who was detained at Gotham State Penitentiary. Using broken mirror shards, he distracts the guards long enough to escape from prison. Then, inspired by mirrors, somehow he becomes Mirror Man. Upon creating a machine that would enable him to look through objects, Mirror Man began targeting Batman so he could figure out his secret identity. He literally discovers Batman's secret identity by using an X-ray mirror, which is freaking nuts. Mirror Man gets sent to prison before he can reveal the identity, however, but because they want conflict, he manages to escape, with a plan to reveal Bruce's identity to the world, only foiled when Alfred, dressed as Batman, interrupts a press conference Bruce Wayne was holding, instantly disproving the fact that Batman is Bruce Wayne because he saw them both in the same room. However, the public should have also seen this coming, so maybe the people of Gotham City are dumber than we thought. Well, I mean, they had Condiment King, so I guess they are pretty dumb. And at 4, Calculator. While the Calculator now seems to be an oracle of sorts for supervillains, the original purpose and MO of the Calculator is far more entertaining and interesting for me. Noah Cutler began his criminal career by crossing the country and getting into fights with various superheroes intentionally, analyzing and recording their battle tactics to ensure that he couldn't be beaten again. Or in some incarnations, he would simply get beaten and then press a button on his chest to ensure that he didn't get beat again. Maybe that was taking down the information or something, I don't know. But either way, do you know how insanely overpowered that could have been? Just being able to press a button on your chest and then boom, you're instantly basically immune to Batman or Robin or even Superman. That would be amazing. You do this enough times and you can just do whatever you want. Then other villains start paying you to do their crimes for them because you guarantee success. That's freaking nuts. I wish they kept that Calculator because he could have been a bigger villain than Darkseid if he kept going like that. Damn, that would have been awesome. Getting close to the end in number 3, Killer Moth. Having decided that the lawbreakers of Gotham City needed a costume protector just as the honest citizens needed Batman, Killer Moth emulated the Dark Knight in every way, copying his paraphernalia and building on his legend to create his own supervillain identity, like Batman's version of Reverse Flash. He even had his own moth signal that supervillains could use when they were in trouble. Drewy Walker, introduced in Batman number 63 in 1951, is actually the first supervillain Barbara Gordon ever defeated as Batgirl, which I mean probably doesn't support the whole most powerful thing, but think about it. If Mothman was worried more about his twisted sense of justice than money, as he was motivated by, he would have been an insane villain. Wanting to protect the criminal underworld just for the sake of it rather than to get paid, while maybe slightly more unrealistic, would make him insane. He also ended up basically making a devil's bargain to become more powerful, but that resulted in him becoming a hideous creature that truly resembled the name Killer Moth. So, that could have been something. Penultimately, in number 2, the Eraser. The Eraser was the chosen alias of Lenny Fiasco, who turned to crime after living his college days under constant mocking and taunting by his classmates. Fiasco is a professional at covering up the tracks of other crimes. For a 20% cut, the Eraser will erase the evidence of another crime. And honestly, I think that this is the only job that anyone with the last name Fiasco could have. Sorry. This villain's power is a special helmet designed to look like a pencil eraser that can wipe off evidence, even those that would be invisible to the naked eye, which is actually pretty damn cool when you think about it. After Batman posed as a villain to try to capture the Eraser, the villain told Bruce, who he had realized was Bruce, that he had actually become a criminal because Bruce shattered his dreams of going out with Celia Smith. Bruce didn't even remember her name, which made Eraser even angrier, but yeah, I think that this is the absolute coolest concept for a supervillain though, because in all honesty, if this guy just wasn't an idiot, he would have ruled the world. Straight up, this guy would ruin every single investigation. He could turn the tide of trials. This guy would end up being a shadow government. If only he wasn't a dumbass. Finally, in at number 1, Lex Joker. Lex Joker was created when John Dee, also known as Dr. Destiny, collapsed the DC universe in half. First appearing in Batman/Superman number 60 in 2009, Lex Joker is a combination of, you guessed it, Clayface and Bane. No, just kidding, it's Joker and Lex Luthor. Lex Joker hired Doomstroke and Terranado to destroy the Justice Titans. However, after the JTs allied with Batman and Superman, he hired 4 more mercenaries to create the Brotherhood of Injustice. Thanks Thanks to Tara, who had gone undercover within the JTs, they were able to attack the Justice Tower, and come on, let's be honest. If you have the brains of Lex Luthor and the complete insanity of the Joker, that's one hell of an opponent. When you have two powerful forces in comics, at some point they're just bound to be put together in some way to create a larger, even more powerful villain. And Lex Joker is probably the scariest combination that we could have gotten that wasn't like Joker and Doomsday or Joker and Darkseid.
Number 10. Harley Quinn. While Harley Quinn's character design and costume has been changed, it's pretty similar to a lot of looks we've seen her in the past. Mostly what we're seeing in her new series is a change to art style, and with her new role as Batman's ally and sidekick, a complete shift over to the side of being a hero. Harley is of course still bringing her unique approach to heroism, so don't panic if you are a fan of Harley's wackiness and standout personality. But considering where she came from, being Joker's sidekick, this is a pretty big change to her character as we originally knew her. If you've been out of the comics for some time and aren't quite as well versed in Harley Quinn's history, you might not recognize her in 2021 as she's gone from full villain to full hero. Number 9. Poison Ivy. Over the last few years, Ivy has gotten a few pretty drastic redesigns, so if you are reading her in 2021 from anywhere along her recent history in the past 3 to 5 years, you might be a little confused when it comes to her look and ask yourself, wait a minute, is that Ivy? Also, who's Queen Ivy? We've seen her go from eco-villain to hero and environmental activist and spokesperson to dead to alive, and split down the middle between those two warring personas, the villain and the hero, when we literally got 2 Ivies. Then from there she became Queen Ivy and got a complete redesign when it came to her costume. Now she's back to wreaking havoc on Gotham, or is she? Time will tell what alignment we'll see for Ivy in the future. But either way, I'm here for the ride. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want to learn about more cool redesigns and updates to characters that we've seen recently, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Especially in the Batverse, I feel like there's so many Bat characters that have been introduced and redesigned. It's awesome. Number 7. Black Mask. Black Mask not only has a new look and redesign, in future state that is, that I must admit is spectacular, but he also got a power upgrade during the Year of the Villain event. Black Mask was given the ability to change his identity with the added upgrade of an identity changing mask, which is pretty powerful. Also, his suits have gotten admittedly a lot more stylish over the past few years. So for those who remember his classic look, Roman Sionis may have the same mask, but the rest of his look also seems to have received an upgrade. Number 6. The Freezes. That's right, not only does Freeze get a new redesign, but he also gets a huge change in the fact that he was joined by his family, becoming a little supervillain fam jam unit all their own. 2 separate units really. In the main continuity, Mr. Freeze was given a serum by Luthor that allowed him to make his long-lasting wish come true. He was able to revive, cure, and become reunited with his frozen love Nora, who also ended up joining him in a life of crime. Yay! However, while it all started out sweet, their reunion would quickly turn sour when Nora became resentful of Victor for making so many choices for her, and in her eyes, trying to control her. Victor blamed the serum for her change of heart, but I mean, who really knows? I feel like Nora's kinda got a bit of a point, even though I feel really bad for Victor in this scenario. In Batman issue 96, we are treated to an alternate Victor Freeze who commits crimes alongside his sons as a little criminal family unit. Super cute. Number 5. Man-Bat. While so many supervillains are getting power upgrades, additional allies, and more horrifying redesigns, Man-Bat is going the other way with it. Man-Bat is Kirk Langstrom, who ends up joining the Justice League Dark and gets a much more adorable character redesign as a result. He looks a lot less monstrous and a lot more humanoid and cute. Kinda geeky. It's great. He even wears a bow tie. Ah! This is likely a redesign meant to symbolize Man-Bat having tackled some of his personal demons and his move more towards a heroic role as opposed to a completely tortured soul and uncontrollable monster. Number 5. Scarecrow. Scarecrow already looked pretty terrifying in the comics, but now he looks intimidating as well. Very intimidating. Not just maniacal and crazed. We got a fresh look at the Scarecrow redesign in previews for Infinite Frontier, and then in all his glory in the actual comic itself in issue 0. Here, a Scarecrow appears to wear a gas mask with straw or sticks coming out of his head, almost like a crown. He is armed with long fingernails or claws at the end of his gloves, evoking a sort of Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street feel, especially as these claws seem to be directly connected to vials of fear toxin, which have tubes connecting to Scarecrow's headpiece? That's what it looks like to me. I think the idea is possibly that Crane is producing the fear toxin himself from his own mind and sending it down to these vials to be dispersed whenever he manages to scratch an enemy with one of his needle-pointed claws. All in all, it's a pretty intense look that might leave you asking who this character is, but kind of in a good way, as I consider this redesign to be an upgrade to the villain. Number 4. Catwoman. Catwoman in Batman Earth 1 has come in with a wild new look that will leave you floored. I mean, you will admittedly still recognize her, just not as the Catwoman that you're used to seeing. This version of Catwoman, instead of wearing her typical black or dark purple catsuit, looks a lot more noticeable and bold by comparison in terms of her design, especially for a thief. Here we see Catwoman donning a purple crop top and hot pants with striped thigh-high socks. She still sports a purple color motif at least though, so that helps with the recognition. Also, she has a paw print belt buckle and a cat mask, a literal cat mask, and she's got a cat on her shirt. Still, this look and redesign for the character is definitely very different. Very unique, I would say. Number 3. Bane. Really, Bane's daughter goes by the alias of Vengeance, but she definitely looks and seems to be following in her supposed father's footsteps. Bane's daughter was first introduced in the new Joker series in issue number 2, and is revealed to be the daughter of the supervillain who went through a series of experiments to give her super strength like her dad. Her mission is to get revenge for his death, and she's doing so by hunting down the Joker, who she and many others believe was responsible for the events and many deaths of A-Day. Her father, who was in Arkham Asylum at the time, was one of the victims of that attack and died. So Bane Jr., aka Vengeance, is out for blood. Number 2. Clayface. You really won't recognize Clayface in the new Batman Earth 1 volume. Clayface is not very recognizable here in terms of the story, as he is disguised for most of his appearance and in terms of his character design. Near the end of the story, we learned that Adrian Arkham, Bruce's grandfather, who returned from the dead, was in actuality Clayface in disguise. We're all used to seeing more of a giant mud monster when it comes to how Clayface is depicted, but instead, here we get a very kind of, I don't know, smooth looking baldy figure in the end, who appears to really kind of just be a man. Like a man who can shapeshift, but just a guy. Like a guy who, if you saw him on the street, you wouldn't run in terror from him or anything. You might just notice his skin was like a little odd looking in terms of its texture, but that's about it. Other than that, he looks pretty average. Number 1. Two-Face. The Earth 1 version of Two-Face sees the character completely reinvented in a way you might not have expected, which is what makes it so great. On Earth 1, Harvey and his sister Jessica are working together to clean up Gotham alongside their good friend Bruce Wayne. After Harvey ends up dead, however, Jessica and Bruce are forced to continue their mission to eradicate corruption and crime in Gotham without Harvey, working on in his honor. But Harvey lives on in more than just their intentions. It turns out that Jessica develops a dissociative personality disorder, in essence becoming her brother due to the trauma of his loss. At least that's what it seems like if we had to explain it on paper. Although never explicitly called Two-Face, the duality of this version exists in the goodness of Jessica and the contrasting ruthless aggression of Harvey. Honestly, the story is so good, you really need to check out the new Batman Earth 1 Volume 3, because even knowing where this story goes, even though I just told you that part, it's still an amazingly compelling read, so go read it, even though you kinda know spoilers now.
Starting us off at our top 10 is a villain known as Bootface, a guy who takes off his boot and puts it in your face. Well, not really, that would just be stupid. Kind of like his name. In Peter Tomasi's Batman and Robin Volume 2, number 23.1, Two-Face, we see the death of this weird character. Bootface is a minion of the villain Terminus and only appears in 12 issues. His first one being Batman and Robin Volume 2, number 10. His exact origin is still unknown, but the reason why he is called Bootface is because during a prior battle with Batman, Bootface tries to burn Batman with a flamethrower. And of course Batman kicks him in his face, leaving a mean looking boot print permanently in his face, thus giving him the name Bootface. I should also mention that Bootface has no powers whatsoever. He's just another bully looking to try and hang with the cool kids. So yeah, this is a weird one and maybe even a villain that was never even needed, but I'm sure as a writer it's fun making up dumb names every now and then. But don't worry, the fun doesn't stop here. At our number 9 spot, we have the terrifying and gruesome Flamingo. First appearing in Batman number 666, ooh, that's a nice number. Written by Grant Morrison, we meet Eduardo Flamingo, who was just an ordinary man until he got caught up with the mob. The mob then brainwashed him and also turned him into a serial killer who eats the faces of his victims. Flamingo sounds pretty dangerous, but doesn't really dress like it. He wears all pink and rides a pink motorcycle, and is also always seen with his whip. He famously almost killed Red Hood before Batman and Robin came to his rescue, but just after that, he did shoot Robin in the back 5 times at point-blank range. Making sure his punishment was indeed painful for his attack, Scarlet slashed the right side of Flamingo's face and then was hit by Jason Todd by a bulldozer, and then Red Hood dropped a huge mass of rubble onto him too. It appears that he is killed, but there is no body that is ever actually found. This guy might not seem like he is deadly or lethal at first glance, but I guarantee you he is quite the match. The only category he doesn't beat Batman in is his style, because damn, Flamingo is fly. Moving on. At our number 8 spot, we have Dr. Freak. First appearing in Batman Legends of the Dark Knight number 91, written by Garth Ennis, we meet Dr. Freak, a former Vietnam soldier who creates a powerful drug known as DCS-2000. Sounds pretty cool, right? No, it doesn't. Stay in school, kids. DCS-2000 is a super powerful version of... What does he do with his victims after he kills them? Well, he enjoys bathing in their blood, because that's what every other hippie would do in the world, right? I highly doubt it. Get it? Anyway, this character sounds like a great character that was probably made in the 60s, right? Nope. Garth Ennis wrote this character just as recently as 1997, making this villain even weirder than originally thought. At number 7, we have the sauciest villain of them all, the Condiment King. First appearing in the TV show Batman the Animated Series in an episode aptly named Make 'em Laugh, we find a series of comedians who are abducted and brainwashed by the Mad Hatter, and then are turned into the most mediocre of criminals. Mediocre is definitely correct because Condiment King's crimes consist of him shooting ketchup, mustard, and other condiments at his enemies while making terrible condiment puns all at the same time. Please excuse me as I relish in the greatness of that idea. This is another villain that sounds like he would fit in perfectly in the 60s, but of course this TV series ran in the early 2000s, with his debut in 2002. Sadly, he was killed later in an episode in 2009, and that was the last of our precious Condiment King. We shall miss you, oh great one. Rest in cheese. At number 6, we have the Calculator. At the age of 5, Noah Cutler was locked in a cage by his mother and would not be let out until he solved the Rubik's Cube. No wonder this guy grew up to be an incredibly intelligent supervillain. In Detective Comics number 463, we meet the terrifying Calculator, a villain from the 1970s comic series who would go across the country committing multiple crimes and would purposefully get caught by his enemies. Why? So he could press a magic button on his chest that would prevent the same hero from ever catching him again. In his first issue, we see him square off against the DC superhero The Atom for stealing a quake-breaking device from one of Ray Palmer's colleagues at the cost of a man's life. I don't think this weapon really worked too well, as he is recorded as having been defeated by many of the DC superheroes, including the Atom himself. And fortunately for him and all of us, he is no longer out in the field, but is now operating behind the scenes as an information broker for the criminal underworld, which I can only guess his desk is covered in Rubik's Cubes. Coming in at our number 5 spot, these weird villains don't get any less weird, we have Emoticon Man. Another amazing creation by the super weird mind of Grant Morrison. His first appearance goes back to 2011 in Batman Incorporated number 6, where Wayne Enterprises' press conference is interrupted by a new villain and his gang, the villain being Emoticon Man. Both him and his gang members wore these crazy emoticon masks, and that was all they wore for their supervillain costumes. There's not much else to tell on this one, so, he gets defeated, and then after that, he was never seen again. I wonder why. At number 4, we have the worst villain to spell, but maybe the best one to say, Onomatopoeia. Now, wait, Dewey, isn't that a literary term? Yeah, it is. And it's also a Batman villain, because why the heck not? Let's make something original, even if it does sound really lame. Onomatopoeia is a serial killer with no superpowers, so guess which kind of heroes he goes after? Heroes with no powers, such as Batman. Back in 2002 in Green Arrow number 12, we meet Onomatopoeia for the very first time after he stalks and murders the heroine, Virago. He is named this because he only speaks in onomatopoeias, such as BAM! Woof! wham! You get the picture. He goes up against Batman a few times and needless to say, obviously gets his butt kicked, but one interesting fact is that this character was actually created by the famous writer/director, Kevin Smith. Kevin, you are wicked awesome. Don't you think you could have come up with a little bit of a better villain than this? I mean, maybe he was still reeling from his loss of the Superman movie that he had going on with Nick Cage from years before, but you know, if that's the case, I'll give him a pass on this one, but seriously. Dude. Starting us off at number 3 is Calendar Man. Any of you gamers out there might remember this villain from the famous games Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. But this villain's first appearance actually goes back to 1958 in Bill Finger's Detective Comics number 258. As a child, Julian Day's father promised he would be back home for the holidays. He waited for his father from Christmas Eve to New Year's Day outside until finally police took him in. He was almost dead from exposure, by the way. From then on out, along with that terrible memory and a terrible relationship with his mother, that began the long and soon-to-be new life of the Calendar Man. So, what's this guy's deal? Well, he will only commit crimes on holidays, such as Christmas, New Year's, you name it. This guy started off really lame, but he was one of the lucky weird ones who got a revamp in the 1996 storyline, The Long Halloween, where he was quite the maniacal evil villain. As we all know, the holidays can be a tough time for a lot of people. We don't need any more stresses or problems than what we already have. So, this guy might just be the evilest villain on our list yet. Either way, I think I'm gonna start calling that one, family member at all the events Calendar Man, because they'll never really know that I'm talking about them. Maybe you guys could use it too. At our number 2 spot, we have the villain from the infamous TV show Polka Dot Door, also named Polka Dot Man. I'm just kidding. He's actually from Batman, and there's probably a lot of you out there that have no idea what I'm talking about, and that was a wasted reference, but that's okay. Nevertheless, Polka Dot Man is a weird Batman villain. First appearing in Detective Comics number 300 back in 1962, we meet the bizarre Polka Dot Man. The man who dresses in a suit with polka dots all over him. But wait, it's not just because the look is highly fashionable, because it isn't. Because these dots can detach from his suit and be used as weapons on the talented dynamic duo. Some of these polka dots can even be used as a teleporter for moments when he is a major loser and needs to bail out of a fight. Yeah, that's right, polka dot guy, I called you a loser. What are you gonna do about it? Teleport out of here? Okay, I will go easy on him. After all, he was created in the 60s, and that was a very fun time, to say the least. So it kind of makes sense. No matter what though, this is a very strange villain, and I think it'd be hilarious to see him brought back into the fold. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot and the most likely supervillain for me to be ever cast as, Johnny Karaoke. First appearing way back in 2007's Batman number 660, we meet Johnny Karaoke, a man raised in Southern California before he attended UCLA for business administration. And then he put his education to good use in the American arm of the Yakuza. I will add, he was fairly successful. However, Johnny and his geisha girls break into Omni-Med headquarters, but is defeated by Batman before he escapes and then is later killed by a villain Grotesque. Johnny Karaoke dies by getting shot in the head just after singing his last tune into his skull-topped cane/sword. And with that, that is the end of Johnny Karaoke and the top 10 weirdest Batman villains on the list. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-da-ba. I'll leave the singing to Johnny Karaoke. Some of these were absolutely hilarious, and I can't imagine anyone ever coming up with any of these guys, and some of these were just quite lame. But lucky for me, I love a good lame pun, song, or even quirky costume. So I really do hope I see the resurgence of these villains in the comics or even on the big screen. Maybe I could actually play Johnny Karaoke. My opening line? Here's Johnny!
At number 10, we have the Joker. Now, I know he's already been portrayed in the DCEU, but I wanted to put him on the list because I don't think his portrayal should end with how he was depicted in Suicide Squad, nor should it continue that way. In my opinion, I think there's a good chance for the DCEU to redeem this character with another iteration of the character. Now, even if you disagree with me on that front, I still think that this character has gotten so much attention in visual media over the last 20 years that it might be time for other villains to get the same treatment. But if we're going to include Matt Reeves' recent Batman movie in this list, which I'm going to do for simplicity's sake, it appears as though, spoiler alert, a Joker character is being hinted at for a sequel anyway. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm very excited to see what they come up with, which is why the Joker still makes this list. But I also couldn't help but feel like this was a missed opportunity to bring an underrepresented villain into the DCEU, like another one on this list perhaps. Man-Bat. This villain has to be one of the creepiest and most traditionally horror-based bad guys in the Batman universe. This bat-human hybrid creature first appeared in Detective Comics number 400 in 1970, making him a pretty classic villain that we don't often see reimagined in Batman stories. He's kind of like Batman's Curtis Connors, if you will, being a monstrosity that was accidentally derived from unstable lab work. He even comes in and out of sentience in later storylines, showing a sympathetic side at times, since after all, there is a scientist somewhere in there. I think it would be really cool to see how a director would go about incorporating villains so visually striking into the DCEU. It would be a great challenge for visual effects artists, and I'd personally love to see his close-ups using practical makeup instead of CGI. It feels like the DCEU has a chance to bring back the campiness of early 2000s practical effects in a tasteful way, don't you think? I think. Alright, at number 8, we've got Poison Ivy. This villain needs to be introduced into the DCEU, and there's some chatter online that this is basically inevitable. Not only is the villain just a hugely prominent player across the Batman universe, but her appearance could also have a pretty interesting social commentary on the state of the world. Poison Ivy is an eco-terrorist, for those of you who don't know, using her hybridized plant DNA to keep Batman and other heroes at bay. And if she were portrayed in a modern DC movie, I think it would be really cool to see how the climate change discussion could be woven into the narrative. I'd honestly be interested to see her as the central figure of a whole movie's conflict personally, because her influence is also enormous, having the ability to use her pheromones to control the likes of Superman himself. It's a good opportunity for the writers of a new Batman universe movie or episode to work in a timely and powerful conflict for Bruce Wayne to overcome. At number 7, it's Solomon Grundy. This zombie villain isn't exclusively a Batman villain, having first been a bad guy to the Green Lantern and also to Superman. Solomon first appeared in a 1987 issue of History of the DC Universe and based on one of those super depressing old 19th century nursery rhymes. His origins have differed over the years, but the general consensus is that when he was alive, he was a criminal type named Cyrus Gold, who was murdered in a swamp and his body left there to reanimate years later. I think he'd be a great addition to a future Batman film because with his association to Green Lantern and Superman, he can be used as a through line to tie a bunch of superhero storylines together as the DCEU expands. Not only that, but zombies also tend to sell pretty well in film and TV. Maybe this is a good way to bring DC zombies to the big screen. I'd love to see that personally. At number 6, Clayface. This villain would be very cool to see in a modern Batman movie or TV show due to both his backstory and just the way he looks. Clayface's backstory deals in the world of film, so it's no question that this character would have a ton of potential for a spot in the DCEU. I mean, Basil's descent into insanity comes from being replaced in a remake of a film he'd originally starred in. So maybe this adds a cool meta element to the DCEU. Fans seem to love how far Marvel went with their meta commentary, so maybe DC could do the same. Or more simply, this could just allow the director to delve into whatever the Hollywood of Gotham would be. And maybe that could open a door to commentary on real-life Hollywood, bringing us even closer to Gotham's realities as a city. Aside from all this, Clayface might just offer another cool opportunity for visual effects artists to go to town on his face folds. I'm a sucker for practical effects, what can I say? At number 5, there's Ra's al Ghul. This guy is such a huge Batman villain in the comics, I'm surprised he hasn't appeared in the movies yet. Ra's is hundreds of years old and uses any means necessary to change the outcome of the future to suit his wishes. He thinks he's doing good for the world by using extreme deadly force against any evildoers, which is a really complex motivation that kind of makes him border on anti-hero. And that's one of the reasons why he'd be a good addition to the DCEU. With a lot of this list consisting of somewhat fantastical villains, Ra's comes off as more of a human character. And with his complex motivations, it makes him a writer's dream when it comes to adding drama to the script. It also might open a door for DC to explore the history of the DC universe by delving into the hundreds of years of Ra's past. The Lazarus Pit is also a great motif that could create some pretty cool conflict among good and evil characters in the DCEU. My casting choice would be Daniel Day-Lewis, by the way, since you didn't ask. That is if they can convince him to come out of retirement, of course. At number 4, there's Hush. This is one of my favorite villains in the Batman universe, and I think he'd make a great addition to the DCEU. Hush is a childhood friend of Bruce Wayne, also growing up very wealthy, but the difference was that Hush, aka Thomas Elliot, hated his parents to the point where he tried to kill them. Hush goes on to become an enraged villain wrapped in surgical bandages wielding 2 pistols who hates Batman. Now, he doesn't seem to me to be enough of a powerful character to drive a whole movie, but I imagine he could fill in a supporting role very well if given the chance. In Matt Reeves' Batman, there appears to be an Easter egg that might hint to Hush as a potential villain in sequels to come, as the Riddler is revealing to Batman that, spoiler alert, his own father was responsible for an innocent man's death. The word Hush appears on the screen for a moment. And who is that innocent person? A reporter with the last name Elliot, just like Hush. Bit of a stretch? I don't know, I think that was intentional. So maybe my wish will come true in some form, even if you still don't consider Matt Reeves' Batman part of the DCEU. At number 3, we've got Scarecrow. Although he appeared in the Dark Knight trilogy played by a favorite of mine, Cillian Murphy, these movies aren't really considered part of the DCEU. This means that this villain is a free agent for future DCEU projects, where he would hopefully be depicted in a bit more of a grand fashion. This villain has been around since 1941, first appearing in World's Finest Comics number 3, so however he'd be worked into a future film or TV show would need to be as grand and impactful as he is in the comics. I think it would be so cool to see how they'd incorporate his fear gas. Like, what would it look like to see the public or even Batman lose their minds to fear in a contemporary context? Like, what would an artificial instillment of fear on the public look like in a more modern Gotham? Perhaps this could be a good chance for commentary on the current human experience and give the DCEU a bit more groundedness. I don't know, maybe their MO is to keep things more detached from reality, but that's the sort of direction I'd like to see them go, personally. And Scarecrow and his abilities might just be a great chance to do that. Okay, at number 2, Jason Todd. Where has Robin been in the DCEU? This popular question seems to be answered simply by the fact that adding Robin might be too campy. The sidekick trope could come off as seeming a bit too old-fashioned, and this might just be what's holding the folks in charge from making it happen. But whatever you think of Jason Todd, he is the Robin that I think could ground the character in a contemporary setting, considering his darker look, motivations, and insecurities. This also opens the door to build a strong through line in a TV series or set of films. I mean, the event of Jason's death at the hands of the Joker is pretty powerful, and if done right, could also build up to a really sweet resurrection in a later sequel or episode. Robin doesn't have to be this quick-witted, bright-eyed sidekick. He can be dark, he can be vengeful, and he can add some really great drama to any DCEU project with his complex relationship to Batman. And if you're thinking, no Ben, it should be Damian Wayne or Tim Drake, well, Damian, as much as I'd love to see him too, would require Batman to be old enough to have a son. And Tim Drake, he's awesome in the comics, but he just doesn't have that dark edge that Jason Todd does. And as for Stephanie Brown, okay, fine, she'd be cool too. Either one. And finally, at number 1, it's Mr. Freeze. Where has Mr. Freeze been? He hasn't even been alluded to or hinted at all, other than Matt Reeves suggesting that he might be interested in exploring the character for a Batman sequel. There's been really no talk of him for the DCEU. Maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger's portrayal scared producers away from considering him because of how silly he can come across, but I really think this character could pose an awesome challenge to see how he could be toned down and modernized for a new appearance. I love this character. He's one of the most nostalgic villains for me, and his backstory falls into that category where you have so much sympathy for him that you almost want him to win sometimes. I just think the DCEU has a chance here to harken back to the early 2000s Batman and Robin nostalgia and make as much of a change with Mr. Freeze as they did with Joker or Batman himself. What would a toned down, darker version of Mr. Freeze look like? I genuinely want to know. Plus, it would just be cool to see how they would work with the visuals for the ice gun. What would the ice beam look like, and how would they justify such insane technology on a more grounded, pseudo real world setting?